It was 5:12 p.m. on December 27th when my phone lit up with a message from my mother. "This new year, just your sister's family." 8 casual words, yet they landed with the same familiar sting I'd felt my entire life. I stared at them for a moment, the reflection of falling snow flickering across the glass window. Then I typed a single word: perfect. No anger, no pleading, just calm. Because this time, I wasn't the one left without a seat. What they didn't know was that I owned a $7 million penthouse overlooking Times Square, a secret I had kept quietly to myself for years. The place had a wraparound balcony that caught every light in Manhattan, a view where the world gathered each year to count down beneath the glittering ball. This new year, I wasn't going to wait for an invitation. I was going to open my doors to everyone who'd ever been pushed aside, to create a night where no one stood in the cold watching someone else's celebration. Have you ever been left out by your own family, told there wasn't room for you at the table? Tell me where you're listening from so I know I'm not alone in this. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, where winters were long, silent, and heavy with the smell of pine and smoke. Back then, the holidays weren't about joy, they were about reminders. Reminders of who mattered and who didn't. Every Christmas morning, Chloe's gifts spilled out from under the tree like a golden flood: bracelets, new clothes, gadgets she'd lose within weeks. Mine were smaller, simpler, sometimes forgotten entirely, but it was New Year's that always hurt the most. While my parents bundled Chloe in scarves and took her downtown to watch the countdown, I sat cross-legged on the couch, watching the same fireworks through the reflection of our old television screen. I remember pressing my fingers to the cold glass as the crowd on TV screamed, 3, 2, 1, and thinking that the confetti looked like stars I could never touch. When I was 14, it happened again, but worse. Mom and Dad had promised we'd all go together that year. I spent the whole day helping decorate the house, setting out snacks, even curling my hair, hoping they'd finally see me as part of the picture. But just before sunset, Mom came downstairs with Chloe already dressed in her sparkly silver coat and said, "Sweetheart, can you stay home tonight? Someone needs to watch the house." Her voice was sweet but final, as if kindness could hide the dismissal beneath it. I watched the front door close, heard the car start, and then silence. Midnight came, and the living room lights were off except for the flicker of the TV showing the New York countdown. I stood by the window, staring at the dark street, and whispered the numbers with them: 10, 9, 8, hearing only my own echo. That night, I learned what it meant to be the one left behind. There was no seat for me on that sidewalk downtown, no hand to hold as the sky burst into light. I had no place on their balcony, just like I had no place at their table. The favoritism wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, like the way Mom's tone changed when she spoke to Chloe. With her, it was admiration wrapped in laughter. "You're such a star, darling." With me, it was instructions. "Be careful, don't overdo it, don't stay up too late." When I won first place at the regional science fair for designing a model of a self-sustaining greenhouse, she barely looked up from the stove. "That's nice," she said softly, "but promise me you'll sleep earlier." That same week, Chloe joined the cheer squad, and suddenly the entire family was at the football field, waving banners with her name. My project sat in the garage, gathering dust beside the boxes of unused Christmas ornaments. Dad was no different. To him, Chloe was the extension of everything he wanted to show off: graceful, social, easy to love. I was the practical one, the one who fixed the broken toaster, who stayed up late trying to figure out why the radio kept losing signal. He'd pat my head sometimes, distractedly, like someone remembering to feed the cat. When relatives visited, introductions were always the same. "This is Chloe, she's our star, and that's Isabel, her sister." I began to hate those words more than anything. Her sister. As if I existed only as a reference point for her shine. There was one particular winter I'll never forget. The snow was so thick that it muted every sound. I had spent the day outside shoveling the driveway, frost biting at my fingers, while Chloe stayed inside practicing her speech for the winter talent show. When I came in, cheeks red, hands numb, I heard Mom laughing in the kitchen with her, helping her rehearse lines, decorating cupcakes for her classmates. I stood at the doorway for a moment, waiting for someone to notice me. No one did. I finally said, "I fixed the heater, it's working now." Mom looked over briefly and said, "Good job, honey," before turning back to Chloe. I walked to my room, closed the door, and realized something that would stay with me for years. Attention isn't given to the one who helps. It's given to the one who shines where others can see. After that, I stopped trying to be visible. I spent more time in the garage, surrounded by the smell of metal and old oil, teaching myself how to rewire broken things. Machines made sense, people didn't. Circuits obeyed logic, families didn't. I could make a dead radio sing again, but I could never make my parents hear me. When Chloe got her first camera, everyone gathered to take photos. When I fixed the broken one from last year, no one even noticed. And each time I was left out of a trip or forgotten in a family story, I learned to shrink a little smaller, speak a little less, take up a little less space. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, I could earn my way to belonging. But no matter what I did, Chloe's shadow stretched further. She was the one who got the center seat at dinner, who sat beside Dad at church, who got extra time in the car while Mom fussed over her makeup. I got the end seat, the back pew, the quiet reminder to let your sister go first. Even during holidays, when the world was supposed to pause for love, I felt like the pause never included me. There was a time I overheard Mom talking to a neighbor. "Chloe's got such potential," she said proudly. "And Isabel, well, she's independent. She doesn't need much attention." I wanted to scream that independence wasn't a choice, it was survival. Being unseen had become my armor, my defense against the sting of being forgotten. Because when you stop expecting warmth, the cold hurts less. By the time I turned 16, I had perfected the art of disappearing. I smiled at family dinners, nodded through conversations about Chloe's grades or her latest boyfriend, and slipped away as soon as the dishes were cleared. When they planned trips, I offered to stay home and water the plants. When they praised Chloe's beauty, I made myself useful instead, fixing, cleaning, managing the background so their picture would look perfect. I thought if I became indispensable, maybe that would make me matter. But all it did was cement my role as invisible support, someone whose worth was measured only in silence. At 17, I thought the acceptance letter from Stanford would finally be my key out, my proof that I was worth something. I remember running into the kitchen, the envelope trembling in my hands, the red Stanford seal shining like a medal. My mother was slicing apples, Chloe scrolling through her phone at the counter. "I got in," I said, my voice almost cracking. For a second, there was silence. Then Mom smiled faintly. "Stanford? That's so far away, Isabel. Are you sure? Chloe will be close to home next year. It'll be easier for all of us. Easier for all of us." That was her way of saying inconvenient for them. My father looked up from the newspaper, adjusted his glasses, and muttered, "California? That's expensive. What's wrong with staying closer to family?" I told them I'd received a full scholarship. It didn't matter. What they heard was distance. What I heard was permission to leave. When I arrived in California that fall, the air felt different, lighter, saltier, filled with a freedom I'd never tasted before. Yet, beneath the excitement was an emptiness that clung like shadow. I had no family car to drop me off, no photos taken at the dorm gates. Chloe's move to a local college had been a family event, complete with dinner and balloons. Mine was a quiet bus ride, a single suitcase, and a phone that stayed silent all night. Stanford was beautiful, but beauty doesn't feed you. The scholarship covered tuition, not life. I worked evenings at a bookstore and weekends as a lab assistant, juggling classes and bills, sometimes sleeping on a borrowed sofa in a shared apartment. There were nights I couldn't afford heat, so I'd pull my coat tighter and study by the blue glow of my laptop. I remember one New Year's Eve, my second winter there, when everyone went home or to parties. I stayed in my dorm alone, eating dry ramen straight from the packet while watching the fireworks outside the window. The countdown echoed faintly from someone's phone down the hall. I whispered along with them, 10, 9, 8, feeling both proud and hollow at once. Yet, somewhere in those long nights, something inside me began to shift. I started tinkering with ideas for my computer science class, building small programs to track inventory for the bookstore where I worked, then expanding them into models that could optimize delivery routes. I was fascinated by how one line of code could change how things moved, how a system could become more efficient, more fair, more connected. Logistics felt like poetry written in logic. For the first time, I found something that responded when I tried. Unlike people, code rewarded effort. If I gave it my all, it worked. The deeper I went, the more obsessed I became. I spent nights in the computer lab while others slept, lit only by the hum of monitors and the tapping of keys. There was a strange peace in that rhythm, the machine and me, speaking a language no one else cared to learn. Outside, couples walked under Christmas lights, their laughter echoing in the courtyard. I stayed at my desk, lines of text blurring into the soft flicker of the screen. Every click, every successful run of code, was a small rebellion against the silence I grew up in. There were times I wondered if my parents ever thought of me. On holidays, I'd send short messages, "Happy New Year. Hope you're well," and sometimes they'd reply days later with a generic thanks, "Love you." Chloe would post photos of family dinners, everyone smiling around a table I used to sit at. I learned to stop checking. The truth was, even far away, I still lived in the same pattern, on the edge of their celebration, watching from behind the glass. During my junior year, I landed an internship with a small logistics company in San Jose. It was chaotic, underfunded, understaffed, but brimming with potential. I saw problems everywhere. Shipments delayed, data lost, hospitals running short of supplies because systems couldn't talk to each other. I started sketching out algorithms to connect them to make sense of the chaos. My supervisor laughed at first, said I was ambitious. But a month later, when one of my prototypes saved the company thousands of dollars, they stopped laughing. I knew then that this was what I wanted to do, build systems that moved things where they were needed most. Maybe because deep down, I knew what it felt like to be misplaced, to wait for someone to notice you, to never arrive where you were supposed to belong. The years blurred together in code and exhaustion. I missed birthdays, skipped parties, forgot what it felt like to relax. My New Year's countdowns were always the same, the quiet tick of the lab clock, the blue light on my hands, the reflection of fireworks flashing against the glass windows. Each year, I'd whisper a wish not for love or recognition, but for a day when I could stand high enough to see the whole city light up, not as a bystander, but as someone who'd built something of her own. Sometimes, after a long night, I'd walk up to Hoover Tower and look out over the campus. The city glittered far in the distance, and I'd imagine what it would be like to have a place there somewhere with windows big enough to see the sky from every side, somewhere I could finally say, "This view is mine." It wasn't pride that fueled me. It was hunger, the hunger to create a space where no one could tell me I didn't belong. Every bit of code I wrote, every class I aced, every extra shift I survived was a brick in that invisible place I was building in my mind. A place above the noise, where the lights weren't for someone else. I didn't know it yet, but those sleepless nights, those solitary New Year's Eve whispers, were shaping the blueprint for my future, the vision that would one day rise above Times Square itself. The dream of a home high enough that no one could shut me out ever again. By the time I turned 23, the world outside had changed, and so had I. I'd graduated into chaos, a pandemic that froze entire cities, cut supply lines, and left hospitals begging for resources. I was working remotely for the same logistics company I'd interned with, watching spreadsheets of failed deliveries pile up on my screen. In one call, I listened as a hospital manager from Texas cried because their ventilators hadn't arrived on time. Something in me snapped. All those years learning how to connect systems, to make chaos flow logically, suddenly had a purpose. I started sketching solutions on my kitchen wall with sticky notes, then building prototypes at night. I wrote code until dawn, mapping every link of the medical supply chain where things stalled, where they vanished. The idea was simple: a digital nervous system that let hospitals see and share their supplies in real time. My small team, just 3 college friends, and me, called it MedAccess. We worked in a borrowed co-working space that smelled of burnt coffee and overused routers. Every cent we earned went back into servers and cloud fees. We lived on instant noodles and adrenaline. Then, one desperate week, a New York hospital found us online. Their trucks were stuck in Pennsylvania, carrying masks they couldn't track. I gave them a trial account, rewired the routes, and stayed up 36 hours to make it run. It worked. Within days, the story spread. More hospitals called. A month later, we were managing supply flows across half a dozen states. My inbox turned from rejection letters to urgent pleas for help. For the first time, my name wasn't the forgotten one, it was the one people depended on. By year's end, more than 50 hospital systems across the country were using MedAccess. Reporters started calling. I wasn't ready for the attention, but when Forbes listed me in 30 under 30, I didn't feel pride, I felt disbelief. I thought of the 14-year-old girl pressed against the window, watching fireworks alone, and whispered, "You made it out." But even success has its own kind of silence. My parents never mentioned the article. Chloe posted a story congratulating someone else that day. A few months later, a Fortune 500 logistics corporation reached out. They wanted to acquire MedAccess outright for $120 million. I stared at the number until it stopped looking real. The night the deal closed, I signed the papers in a rented office barely bigger than a bedroom. When the final signature was done, the lawyer slid the folder across the desk and said, "Congratulations, Miss Hart. You're officially free." I walked outside, and the air felt strange, too open, too bright. After years of scraping by, there was no more rent to worry about, no more ramen, no more sleeping on couches. Freedom didn't roar, it whispered. People expected me to celebrate, to buy the car, the clothes, the mansion. I didn't. I bought coffee and sat by the window of a small cafe, watching the city move below. For the first time, I didn't want to prove anything. I just wanted a place that felt like mine. A place that gave me what I'd been chasing since childhood, a view I wasn't excluded from. That night, as fireworks burst over the bay, I remembered my silent New Year's Eves, the way I used to stare through screens at other people's lights, and I knew exactly what I wanted to buy. Not a yacht, not a villa, but a view. A place where the entire sky belonged to me for once. After months of searching quietly through private listings, I found it. A penthouse perched above Times Square, glass walls wrapping around the skyline, the same spot the world watched every December 31. $7 million. I bought it through a discreet LLC so no one, not even my family, would know. I didn't tell a soul. The first time I rode the private elevator up, the doors opened to a wall of light. The whole city shimmered beneath me, billboards flashing, taxis flowing like molten gold, the hum of humanity rising 20 stories high. I stepped onto the balcony, the wind sharp and cold, carrying the scent of steel and snow. I leaned over the railing and laughed softly. For years, I'd been told to stay home, to watch from the sidelines. Now I was standing above the very square where the world counted down without me. Inside, the penthouse was still empty, bare floors, echoing halls, windows that made the skyline feel endless. But to me, it was already alive. I walked from room to room, tracing the outlines of my future with my fingertips. When the realtor handed me the keys, a thin silver ring heavy in my palm, I whispered to no one in particular, "I finally have my own balcony." That phrase stayed with me, my own balcony. Not just a terrace of glass and steel, but a symbol of everything I'd built. Every sleepless night, every ignored message, Every moment of quiet humiliation had led here. I turned the key in the lock for the first time, heard the soft click, and felt something inside me settle. No more asking for a seat. No more watching from windows. The world could look up at the ball drop, but I, for once, could look down and see it all. The message from my mother kept replaying in my mind long after I put the phone down. This new year, just your sister's family. I tried to brush it off as indifference I'd grown used to, but something about the phrasing bothered me. Just your sister's family. Was it really just me they wanted to exclude, or had they decided to shrink the entire world down to Chloe again? I needed to know the truth. That night, I scrolled through my contacts until my thumb stopped on one name. Rachel, my cousin, Aunt Marianne's daughter. She'd always been the one person in the family who spoke honestly, even when the truth stung. I called her. It rang twice before her voice filled the line, warm and slightly breathless. Isabel, wow, it's been forever. What's going on? I hesitated. Did you get a New Year's invitation from my parents? There was a short silence, then a soft laugh, not the amused kind, but the bitter kind. Oh, that message. Yeah, we didn't get one. Mom called them last week about Christmas leftovers, and your mom said they're keeping it small this year, just Chloe and her family. Even Grandma wasn't invited. She's furious. Said it's the first time in 30 years she won't be hosting everyone under one roof. I leaned back against the wall, the weight of those words sinking in. So it wasn't just me, they'd cut everyone else out too. For Chloe, again. The picture came together easily. A quiet dinner table, my parents fussing over Chloe's baby, the rest of the family left on red. Rachel sighed. Honestly, Izzy, I think people are done with it. Last year, Mom told me she wasn't going back if everything was going to revolve around your sister again. Grandma said the same. We've all tried to keep peace, but it's always about Chloe. It's exhausting. Her words didn't sting, they steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't the only one who saw the imbalance. Rachel, I said slowly, what if this year we do something different? There was a pause on the line. Different how? I looked toward the window, the lights of the city flickering like distant sparks below my penthouse. I have a place here in New York, big enough for everyone. What if we celebrated together? No comparisons, no favorites, just family. Rachel's voice brightened instantly. You're serious? In New York? Wait, what kind of place are we talking about? I smiled. Let's just say there's room for a view. She let out a delighted gasp. Mom's going to lose her mind. I'll call her right now. If you're sure, we'll come. After we hung up, I sat for a while, listening to the faint hum of the city through the glass. Then I opened my contact list again. Eli, my cousin in Chicago, picked up on the second ring. Izzy, long time. You okay? His voice always carried a mix of humor and heaviness, like someone who'd seen too much and still chose to laugh. I'm fine, I said. Just wondering, are you doing anything for New Year's? He snorted. What? The annual Chloe show? Pass. I stopped going 2 years ago. You know how it is, every toast somehow ends up about her promotion, her baby, her hair. I'll probably just stay in and play guitar. I may have been. Well, I said slowly, what if I gave you a better stage? He went quiet for a moment. Define better. Times Square. My place. I'm hosting the family this year, everyone who's tired of being an audience. There was a beat of silence, then a low whistle. A family New Year's Eve in New York? Without your parents running it? He laughed. Count me in. I'll bring the guitar and maybe a few songs Chloe's never heard of. Next, I called Aunt Marianne. She answered on speaker, the sound of running water in the background. Isabel, dear, how are you? I told her about the plan, how I wanted to host something new, something free of all the old favoritism. She stopped what she was doing halfway through my sentence. You mean it? You're inviting all of us? Yes. Everyone who wants to come. There was a soft crack in her voice when she said, You have no idea how long I've waited for someone in this family to do that. To make space for all of us again. By the time I hung up, something inside me felt lighter, like a window had opened after years of stale air. I made 2 more calls Uncle Ray, who lived upstate and had grown quiet over the years, and finally Grandma. When she picked up, her tone was sharp but weary. "Isabel, I was just telling your aunt how your mother's lost her mind. A New Year's without the family, what nonsense." I smiled into the receiver. "Then come to mine, Grandma, New York. I'll take care of everything." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost picture her clutching the phone in that floral kitchen of hers. "Your place." "Oh, sweetheart, are you sure? That's a lot to handle." "I'm sure," I said softly. "It's time we had a new kind of New Year's, one where everyone's welcome." Her voice softened, trembling around the edges. "Then tell me when to pack." By midnight, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunts sending heart emojis. Eli confirming his flight. Rachel texting, Grandma's crying happy tears. "You did this, Izzy." I set the phone down on the marble counter, walked to the balcony, and stepped into the winter air. Below me, Times Square pulsed with color, alive even before the new year began. For a long time, I just stood there, the cold wind brushing against my hair, the city glittering like a sea of stars. I thought about every year I'd been left out, about watching from behind glass while my family toasted without me. Now, I had glass walls too, but they were mine. I whispered into the night. "If they won't open the door, I will." The words vanished into the wind, carried above the rooftops. Behind me, the empty penthouse echoed with possibility. Soon it wouldn't be empty. Soon there would be laughter, music, warmth, and a table where everyone had a place. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't waiting for a family to invite me in anymore. I was building one of my own. The next few days unfolded like a quiet storm. Once everyone had confirmed, I turned my penthouse into a command center. Lists multiplied across the marble countertop: guest names, arrival times, dietary notes, airport pickups. I called the building's concierge and explained I'd be hosting family for New Year's Eve. He sounded mildly alarmed until I told him I would handle security personally. The plan was simple but airtight. Guests would arrive through the private elevator, 1 floor below the rooftop level. The concierge would check names, security would issue color-coded wristbands, and no one else would be allowed beyond that point. I didn't want any chaos, no strangers wandering in from the street. This wasn't a nightclub, it was family. Next came food. I didn't want catered trays or lukewarm buffets. I wanted a dinner that felt alive, personal, something that said effort and warmth instead of extravagance. Through a friend from my Stanford days, I found Chef Marco, a Brooklyn-based chef known for his Italian-American fusion: simple, honest food with flair. When he arrived to inspect the kitchen, he ran his hand over the granite counters and whistled. "You've got a better setup than most restaurants," he said, grinning. Together, we planned the menu. Herb-crusted beef tenderloin, pan-seared sea bass, truffle mac and cheese for the kids, roasted vegetables with balsamic glaze, and a dessert table with mini cannoli, tiramisu cups, and fresh berry pavlova. For the older relatives who didn't drink, we designed special mocktails: pomegranate spritzers with rosemary and honey. "We'll start prep early morning," Marco said. "By 7, this place will smell like heaven." Music was next. I hired a duet violin and guitar pair from a small jazz bar in Soho. They were young, talented, and didn't mind taking requests. I told them I didn't want anything loud, just warmth. "Think of it like conversation through melody," I said. They smiled, nodding. For backup, I created a New York jazz playlist, full of soft brass and the kind of rhythm that feels like a heartbeat behind the city lights. No pop songs, no artificial cheer. Just the hum of something real. The decorations came together in layers. I kept it simple: gold lights draped around the tall glass windows, white hydrangeas and lilies in clear vases, and a massive digital countdown clock mounted on the far wall, glowing soft amber. On the main table, I placed cinnamon-scented candles and crisp linen runners. No tinsel, no chaos, just elegance and warmth. In one corner, near the balcony doors, I set up a confetti station with labeled containers of biodegradable flakes, silver, gold, and translucent white. Easy to clean, gentle on the city below. Safety on the balcony was non-negotiable. I installed clear windshields, arranged outdoor heaters, and draped thick wool blankets over the back of every chair. For the kids, I ordered noise-canceling headphones, the soft kind used at concerts, so they could watch the fireworks without the fear of the sound. I could already imagine their small faces pressed to the glass, wide-eyed at the explosion of color across the sky. When all logistics were done, I focused on the most important detail: the gifts. I wanted every person to feel remembered. For Grandma, I found a delicate box of imported herbal tea, her favorite blend of chamomile and citrus paired with a hand-woven scarf from a local artisan shop in Chelsea, the kind that would wrap around her like a hug. For Rachel's children, I ordered a Lego skyline of New York City, wrapped in blue paper and topped with a silver ribbon. For Eli, who always carried his guitar like a second heartbeat, I picked out a new capo and a set of high-end guitar strings engraved with his initials. For Aunt Marianne, I bought a vintage-style photo book called New York Then and Now, a chronicle of the city's history in side-by-side images. On the first page, I wrote in gold ink, "For the woman who never stopped holding the family together." There would be one long table in the dining room. No kids' table. No separations. I wanted everyone to sit together, shoulder to shoulder. The table itself stretched nearly the entire length of the glass wall, where the skyline unfolded like a living mural. I set 12 crystal glasses, each paired with a folded linen napkin and a card bearing their name in hand-drawn cursive. When I stepped back to look, the symmetry was perfect, not sterile, not formal, but intentional. I brought in a local florist to weave garlands of evergreen and white roses along the center. The scent filled the room, crisp and clean, like the first breath after snow. On each plate, I placed a small handwritten note that read, "Thank you for showing up." It wasn't about extravagance, it was about acknowledgement. A day before the event, I tested everything like a conductor before a symphony. The lights, the music, the seating, the timing of the elevator. My project manager brain wouldn't rest until every variable was covered. I even ran a mock dinner rehearsal with Chef Marco, who laughed when I started timing his plating speed with a stopwatch. "Relax, Isabel," he said with a grin. "It's dinner, not NASA." But I couldn't help it. This wasn't just another event, it was my declaration. My answer to every year I'd been left behind. Late that night, when everything was ready, I turned off the main lights and stood in the glow of the city. The penthouse was quiet, the air humming faintly from the heaters on the balcony. I looked at the reflection of the room in the glass, the table gleaming like a promise, the candles flickering, the empty chairs waiting. For a moment, I saw my younger self sitting in one of them, still waiting to be invited to the celebration. I whispered softly, "You made it. You have your own table now." Before going to bed, I set up a small camera gimbal near the balcony to record the night privately. Just for memories, nothing public, nothing shared. I told myself I'd keep the footage between family only. No live stream, no social media. This was ours alone. But as I looked down at Times Square from my balcony, watching the early crowds gather, I had no idea how one small decision, that quiet camera in the corner, would soon become the spark that made the whole world see what I had built. By the time the last checklist was crossed off, the city outside had begun to glow. From my balcony, I could see the slow build of New Year's Eve, streets closing, barricades rising, and rivers of people flooding toward Times Square. The sky was deep navy, speckled with the reflections of neon lights bouncing off the glass towers. Inside, the penthouse felt alive for the first time. Warm air, faint notes of garlic and rosemary from the kitchen, and the low hum of jazz rolling softly through the speakers. Everything was ready. The private elevator chimed around 7. I walked to the door, heart thudding, and watched as it slid open. Rachel stepped out first, bundled in a white coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She took 2 steps into the foyer, looked up at the floor-to-ceiling windows, and froze. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide. The entire sweep of Times Square blazed before her like a living painting, billboards flashing, a sea of people, and the glimmering ball perched high above, waiting for midnight. She spun toward me, laughter breaking through her disbelief. You built an entire world up here and didn't tell anyone?" I laughed, wrapping my arms around her. Some surprises are better saved for the right night. Her 2 kids, bundled in red scarves, dashed forward, squealing the moment they caught sight of the view. "Mom, you can see everything." They ran to the balcony doors, pressing their faces to the glass. When I slid them open, a rush of icy air filled the room, making them stop short, giggling as they felt the cold sting their cheeks. "Careful," I said, pulling 2 thick wool blankets from the basket by the door. I knelt to drape one over each of them, tucking the edges under their small arms. "You can go out, but only if you promise to keep warm." They nodded eagerly, stepping onto the balcony as the city roared below them, their laughter carried away by the wind. Eli arrived next, guitar case slung over his shoulder, his girlfriend holding a tray of homemade cookies wrapped in foil. "Smells like heaven already," he said, sniffing the air as he kicked off his boots. From the kitchen, Chef Marco called out, "You're just in time for the first round of canapés." Platters of miniature crostini and seared scallops appeared on the marble island, shimmering under the soft light. Aunt Marianne came in moments later, her hands full of small gifts, her eyes misty as she whispered, "It's even more beautiful than the pictures Rachel sent." Grandma was the last to arrive. When the elevator doors opened for her, she stood quietly, her gloved hands gripping her cane. I walked to her slowly. "Welcome home," I said. She looked around the golden lights, the scent of rosemary, the soft jazz, and then at me. "You did all this?" I nodded. She smiled, a smile that trembled on its way to becoming tears. "Then this," she said softly, "is where the family truly begins again." We settled into a rhythm. Eli unpacked his guitar, testing chords that drifted through the air like warmth itself. Chef Marco moved in and out of the kitchen like an artist, arranging plates that looked almost too beautiful to eat. The children gathered around the counter, eager to help dust sugar over the cannoli. In one corner of the room, I had set up a small table with black cards and gold pens, a station for everyone to write their New Year's intentions. Rachel went first, jotting something quickly, then pinning her card to the board with a tiny golden clip. "What did you write?" I asked. She grinned. "To stop apologizing for wanting peace." End of crap. Soon, the others followed Eli, scribbling, "Play more music, worry less." Grandma writing slowly in looping cursive, "To see my family together again before my eyes close for good." I swallowed hard reading that one. Then I picked up a pen and wrote mine, "To build tables, not walls." As dinner approached, I guided everyone to the dining room. The lights dimmed automatically as the sunset deepened into indigo, and the glow from Times Square washed over the room like liquid gold. The long oak table stretched beneath the crystal chandelier, lined with candles and sprigs of evergreen. There was no kids' table, just one long, equal row. Grandma sat at the center, her scarf loosely tied around her shoulders, her teacup steaming in front of her. The children took their seats beside her, their laughter echoing softly through the clinking of silverware. When everyone was finally seated, I looked around and felt a quiet swell rise in my chest. For years, our family gatherings had always been split, adults in one room, children in another, hierarchy marked by proximity to my parents, but tonight there was none of that. There were no ranks, no favorites, no corners of exclusion. Just faces lit by candlelight, full of warmth and anticipation. Eli strummed a few soft notes as Marco served the first plates. Conversations started gently, then grew stories about childhood winters, jokes about forgotten resolutions, Grandma's laughter rolling louder than anyone's. Rachel leaned across the table, whispering, "You know, it's been years since I've seen her laugh like that." I smiled, pouring her a glass of wine. "Then we're doing something right." At one point, I stepped away to the balcony, just to breathe it in. The city below had turned electric streams of light pulsing through the crowd, countdown banners flashing across every screen. Behind me, the sound of forks and chatter filled the air. I glanced back through the glass and saw Grandma surrounded by everyone, Eli playing softly beside her, Rachel wiping powdered sugar off her son's chin, Aunt Marianne lifting her camera to capture the moment. For the first time in my life, I wasn't watching a family from outside the window. I was inside it. And so were they. When I returned to the table, Grandma reached out and took my hand. "Do you feel it, Isabel?" she said. "Every year, we were told to make room for one person's light. But tonight, everyone shines." Her words sat in my chest like an anchor. I squeezed her hand back, unable to speak. Around us, laughter rose and fell in waves. Eli's guitar hummed beneath it all, steady and warm. The windows reflected the glow of the city, and somewhere below, a million strangers prepared to count down to midnight. But up here, time felt suspended. No one was left out. No one was lesser. And for the first time, every single person at that table, myself included, finally had a place. Dinner began the way all good things do, quietly, with the soft hum of contentment. The table glowed under the chandelier, reflections of gold light rippling across glass and silver. The first course arrived. Delicate plates of seared sea bass with lemon butter and fennel salad, each one glistening like something out of a dream. The second came in slow procession, beef tenderloin, pink at the center, steam curling into the air, truffle mac and cheese bubbling in miniature ramekins for the children. The scent of rosemary, garlic, and caramelized onions hung thick in the air. Outside, the city flickered, and from the balcony, a faint echo of cheering crowds floated upward like distant surf. No one spoke for a moment. Only the sounds of cutlery meeting porcelain, the occasional sigh of approval, and the steady rhythm of jazz beneath it all, a brushed snare, a lazy bass, the whisper of a saxophone. It was peaceful, warm, complete. I waited until the plates were half empty before I stood. My hands rested lightly on the back of my chair, the glow from the chandelier tracing across the edge of the table. "I'm not much of a speech person," I began, and the chatter quieted instantly. Every eye turned to me, Rachel's bright and teary, Grandma's patient and knowing. "So, I'll keep it simple." I took a breath. "Thank you for coming." 4 words. That was all I had planned to say, but they carried more than I expected. The room stilled, then someone clinked their glass. Laughter rippled softly, and Eli raised his hand, smiling. "To Isabel," he said, "who built the balcony we all get to stand on." The room lifted in applause, soft and genuine. I felt my throat tighten, and I sat back down quickly, pretending to adjust my napkin. When the laughter settled, Grandma leaned forward, her silver bracelet catching the light. "Before midnight comes," she said, "I think we should do something in old tradition, in a new way." She reached for one of the black cards from the corner table, the ones we'd used earlier, and held it up. "One by one, we'll each read what we're leaving behind in the old year, and what we're carrying into the new." Rachel clapped her hands together. "I love that." So it began. Aunt Marianne went first. She smiled softly, voice trembling as she read, "I'm leaving behind the need to please everyone. And I'm bringing forward the courage to be okay even when I can't." A few nods, a few quiet tears. Eli followed. "Leaving behind comparison. Carrying forward rhythm." He strummed a single note on his guitar, a playful punctuation that made everyone laugh. When it came to Grandma, she unfolded her paper slowly. Her handwriting shimmered in the candlelight. "Leaving behind the years I spent watching others tear our family apart," she said. carrying forward gratitude for the one who stitched us back together. She looked straight at me. I didn't move. My chest ached in that sweet, unbearable way that comes only when something long broken starts to heal. I was last. I picked up my card, fingers trembling slightly. "I'm leaving behind silence," I said. "And I'm carrying forward belonging." The room fell quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't demand words. Grandma reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was warm, paper soft. "Con vừa trả lại ý nghĩa của giao thừa cho gia đình mình." She whispered in Vietnamese, the language she only used when she meant something deep. "You just gave New Year's its meaning back to our family." I didn't realize I was crying until she squeezed my hand. Rachel dabbed her eyes. Eli's guitar hummed softly in the background, a lullaby of notes that seemed to wrap around us all. For a moment, time itself felt suspended, no past, no pain, just people, together, breathing the same warmth. Chef Marco emerged briefly from the kitchen with dessert. Tiers of mini cannoli dusted with sugar and plates of pavlova topped with berries. The kids clapped, their faces glowing pink under the lights. "Save room for midnight snacks," he teased, retreating back with a wink. At 11:45, the air changed. The city's roar below began to climb like a drumbeat, rising towards something inevitable. The countdown clock on the wall blinked 23:50. The violinist and guitarist returned to the center of the room, playing a soft rendition of Auld Lang Syne. Everyone started moving, refilling glasses, gathering on the balcony, pulling on coats. I stepped aside to grab my small camera gimbal, checking that it was still recording. "Just private footage," I reminded myself. "A keepsake, nothing more." But then, in the midst of the laughter, one of Rachel's kids, maybe out of excitement or habit, took a quick photo with her phone. The family gathered around the table, the skyline glowing behind us. She posted it to her social story, adding a handful of emojis and a simple caption, "Best New Year's ever." She didn't realize her phone had automatically tagged the location, Times Square Penthouse. I didn't notice any of it then. I was standing near the window, watching my family swirl together in laughter and music, everyone finally, impossibly, at peace. Grandma raised her glass of tea. "To the new year," she said. "And to the ones who chose to be here." And as the city below began its final countdown, I realized this was more than a reunion, it was a reclamation. A family reborn on the balcony of someone who'd once been told she didn't belong on it. I didn't know that far below, people were already noticing the post messages flying through family group chats, old friends sharing screenshots, whispers beginning to travel across time zones. But up here, surrounded by the only people who mattered, all I knew was the feeling of home, real, fragile, earned. The night was just beginning to unfold, and for once, I wasn't watching it through glass. I was the one holding the light. At 11 hours 59 minutes and 50 seconds, the world seemed to hold its breath. From the balcony, Times Square looked like a living galaxy, millions of tiny lights pulsing in rhythm, a sea of faces all turned upward, waiting. The massive screens blazed with color, and the final numbers began to flash. 10, 9, 8. The sound rose like a wave from the crowd below, swelling through the skyscrapers, echoing even up here, 40 floors above the ground. I could feel it through the glass, through my skin, the vibration of a city holding a single heartbeat. Inside the penthouse, everyone had rushed to the balcony. Rachel wrapped her scarf tighter, her kids squealing as they pressed forward. Eli tuned a last soft chord before slinging his guitar aside and joining them. Grandma held my arm, her grip firm but trembling with excitement. The cold bit at our cheeks, and the heaters hummed steadily, glowing red against the railing. I looked around, the garlands fluttering, glasses raised, faces lit by the reflection of screens and sky. It didn't feel like a private party anymore. It felt like standing at the center of something vast and alive. 3, 2, 1. When the clock hit 0, the sky exploded. Fireworks burst open like supernovas, scattering rivers of gold and violet through the night. The windows of nearby buildings flared with the light, and the roar of the crowd rolled upward in a single, thunderous cheer. Rachel's children screamed in delight, throwing their hands into the air as confetti burst from our balcony cannons, spinning into the wind like thousands of tiny meteors. For a heartbeat, it looked as though the entire sky was raining gold. The cold air hit my face, sharp and clean, but I didn't flinch. Someone handed me a glass of champagne. I raised it, laughing without realizing it. Eli's girlfriend captured the moment on her phone, the reflection of fireworks dancing across my eyes, my mouth open in the kind of smile I hadn't worn in years. Later, when I watched the footage, I barely recognized myself. It was just 10 seconds long, but in that frame, I didn't look like someone who had been excluded or compared or forgotten. I looked free. Grandma turned to me, her breath visible in the icy air. "Do you feel it?" she asked. Her voice was soft but clear against the thunder outside. I nodded. I couldn't speak. All I could do was watch as Rachel hugged her kids, as Aunt Marianne wiped her eyes, as Eli strummed the opening notes of Auld Lang Syne, the melody barely audible against the fireworks but somehow still cutting through. Everyone began to hum along, and I realized that what I was hearing wasn't just a song, it was the sound of belonging. Behind us, the camera gimbal kept recording, panning slowly from face to face, catching laughter, hugs, toasts, the way people leaned on one another against the cold. Someone shouted, "One more photo." And we gathered close, arms around shoulders, cheeks pressed together. The flash caught us mid-laughter, confetti still spinning in the air. It was Rachel's husband, half drunk on joy and champagne, who uploaded the short 10-second clip to the extended family group chat. The caption was innocent. "You guys missed out. Isabel threw the most amazing New Year's Eve." He didn't think much of it. He just wanted to share a happy moment, a panoramic shot of us on the balcony, fireworks exploding behind us, Grandma waving her glass at the camera, and me, laughing in the center. The clip began to spread. Not viral in the public sense, no strangers, no headlines, but through familiar veins, cousins, uncles, neighbors, church friends. It bounced across group chats, then into small-town Facebook groups. The same people who'd once asked, "Whatever happened to Isabel?" now saw me bathed in light, surrounded by the very family they thought I'd lost. Meanwhile, across town, in a quiet suburban house, my parents sat on the couch with Chloe and her husband. Their New Year's was subdued: a small dinner, muted chatter, a TV showing the Times Square broadcast. My mother was scrolling through her phone when it began to buzz. One message, then another, and another. "Isabel's party looks incredible. Why aren't you with her? Your mom's there too, right?" saw Grandma. She frowned, confused. Then Chloe's husband leaned over, eyes narrowing at the phone. "Wait, isn't that your family? That's Times Square." The room fell silent as the clip looped, our balcony glowing, fireworks bursting overhead, laughter filling the air. On screen, for a split second, the camera caught me turning toward the city, smiling, champagne in hand, surrounded by everyone they hadn't bothered to invite. My mother's hand froze. The sound from the TV seemed to fade away. Where did she get that view?" Chloe asked, her tone brittle. "That's top-tier Times Square property." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. My father muttered something about probably rented, but even he didn't sound convinced. The phone kept buzzing with notifications. "Your Isabel really outdid herself. Looks like the family had a better time there. So beautiful, why didn't you go?" The questions multiplied faster than she could reply. On the TV, the camera panned over the crowd in Times Square, zooming briefly upward. For a fleeting moment, the network broadcast caught the top of our building, the shimmer of our lights, a faint burst of confetti from above. It was only a few seconds, but it was enough. My mother's face went pale. Back in the penthouse, I had no idea any of this was happening. I stood by the railing, the city stretching infinitely beneath me, my scarf fluttering in the wind. Grandma leaned her head against my shoulder, humming softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring of keys, the set that opened every door in this place. I turned it once in my hand, feeling the cool metal press into my palm, then walked to the small hook by the balcony door and hung it there. The keys glinted faintly in the light, swaying gently in the draft. It wasn't decoration, it was declaration. For years, I'd been the one left behind when doors closed, the one watching others walk through thresholds I wasn't invited to cross. But tonight, I had built my own door. And I had opened it not for approval, not for revenge, but for those who truly showed up. Eli's voice rose behind me. "To new beginnings," he shouted, holding his glass high. Everyone echoed, voices tangled in laughter. Rachel's kids danced barefoot in the warmth of the heaters, tossing handfuls of confetti into the air. I took one last look at the skyline, at the brilliant chaos below, and whispered to no one in particular, "This is what home looks like." The fireworks began to fade, their final embers floating down like stars, losing their way. I stepped inside, closing the glass doors gently behind me. The sound dimmed to a soft hush, the echo of celebration fading into something peaceful. On the wall, the countdown clock blinked 0 hours and 47 seconds, frozen mid-transition like time itself had stopped just long enough for us to breathe. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was ending a year. I felt like I was finally beginning one. The morning after the fireworks, the city looked washed clean. The confetti was gone, the streets below quiet again, and sunlight poured through the penthouse windows in long, forgiving streaks. It was 10:06 a.m., and I was still in my robe, barefoot, sipping coffee by the balcony, when my phone began to ring. The caller ID flashed Mom. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But then I saw Grandma already awake, sitting by the fireplace with her cup of tea, and I knew whatever needed to be said, this was the morning it would happen. I answered and set the phone on speaker. My mother's voice burst through, sharper than usual. "Isabel, do you realize what you've done? You've made this family look ridiculous. The whole church group is talking about that video about how everyone was with you while we sat here like fools." Her words hit in short, frantic bursts, the kind that carried more embarrassment than anger. I took a slow sip of coffee, keeping my voice steady. "I just did exactly what you told me, Mom. This year, just your sister's family. Those were your words. So, I made my own gathering. For those who wanted to show up, that was my version of perfect." Grandma set her teacup down, listening silently, her eyes never leaving mine. My mother sputtered. "Don't twist this around. You excluded us publicly. You should have told us you were doing something like that. It looked like you were bragging." Before I could respond, my father's voice cut in, muffled but firm. "You didn't have to flaunt it, Isabel. A penthouse, Times Square fireworks. What were you trying to prove? You embarrassed your mother." I let the silence stretch long enough to hear their breathing on the line. Then I said quietly, "I didn't flaunt anything. I built something because for years, I was told there was no room for me. So I built a place where everyone who had been forgotten could have a seat." "Don't dramatize this," my father snapped. "You're twisting things." "Alder." And that was when Grandma's voice, steady and low, entered the room. "Robert. Judy. Enough." The air seemed to still around us. "You want to talk about embarrassment?" she said, her tone slicing through the noise. "You excluded me. Me. In 30 years of New Year's, I have never been left out until this one." There was silence on the other end. Grandma continued, her voice unwavering. "You told everyone just Chloe's family. You didn't just cut out Isabel, you cut out the entire family. I got messages all morning from cousins, from Marianne, from Eli. Do you know what they said? They said it was the first New Year's that felt like home again. Isabel didn't brag. She restored something you lost the moment you started choosing one child over everyone else." My mother's tone faltered. "Mother, that's not what happened." "Oh, it's exactly what happened," Grandma snapped, and I heard the tremor of years in her voice. You turned family gatherings into Chloe's stage, and the rest of us into her audience. And when Isabel stopped waiting for applause and built her own table, you called it arrogance. No. What she did was healing. The phone line went utterly still. I could almost hear the static of guilt traveling through it. My father sighed, trying to recover. We were only trying to keep things simple. Chloe had plans. Simple? Grandma interrupted again, sharper this time. You've mistaken simplicity for selfishness. You've mistaken pride for love. Isabel didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourselves by abandoning your own kin. I leaned back, letting her words fill the room. There was a long pause, then a weak attempt from my mother. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. We just thought. I finished it for her. You thought I'd sit alone again, like every year before. No one spoke. The only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the wall clock. I looked at Grandma, who gave me a small, approving nod. Then, with calm finality, I said, Mom, Dad, I'm ready to talk when you're ready to listen, not when you're ready to assign blame. I pressed end call, and the line went dead. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward, it was freeing. Grandma smiled faintly and lifted her teacup. You did right, she said simply. It was time. Within minutes, my phone started lighting up again, but this time, not from them. The family group chat was buzzing nonstop. Rachel, last night was the best in years. Please, Isabel, can we make it tradition? Eli, count me in for next New Year's. I'll bring a full band this time. Aunt Marianne. Everyone's still talking about it. You brought back our family. Grandma typed slowly. Next year, same balcony. I'll bring the tea. Then one message from an unknown number popped up. I opened it and froze. Chloe. Her text was short. Cheap move, Izzy. Oh. I stared at it for a while, then typed nothing at all. Some silences didn't need to be filled, they just needed to stand, clear and unmoving, like glass between two worlds. Grandma reached over, touching my wrist lightly. Let her sit with her own reflection, she said. For once, don't dim yours. I smiled faintly, nodding. Then I picked up the camera still resting on the table from the night before and scrolled through the footage. The clip of us on the balcony appeared, the one where the fireworks burst overhead, where I was laughing without effort. For a moment, I watched it again, not as proof of anything, but as remembrance. A window into the night. I finally stopped asking for permission to belong. I hit save and closed the screen. By noon, messages were still pouring in, people asking to make the New Year's at the Penthouse a family tradition, suggesting themes, food ideas, even a charity donation next time. It wasn't noise, it was connection. Real, chosen, and finally mutual. I looked around the quiet apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor where last night's confetti still glittered faintly near the balcony door. I didn't sweep it away. Some reminders were meant to stay, proof that something had changed forever. I turned to Grandma, who had returned to her tea. It's strange, I said softly. They called it a show, but all I did was open a door. She looked at me, smiling. Yes, she said. And for the first time, the right people walked through it. 3 days later, January 3rd, 7 p.m., the Penthouse felt different. The lights were soft and golden now, the kind that made shadows look kind instead of cold. The city below was quieter, stripped of fireworks and crowds, just the hum of traffic and winter wind brushing the glass. I had set a small table for 4, in the same dining room that only nights ago had been filled with laughter and music. This time there was no jazz, no clinking champagne flutes, only the faint hiss of the heater and the gentle swirl of red wine in 4 glasses. The air smelled of warm tomato soup and rosemary bread, simple, steady, and human. At exactly 7, the elevator chimed. I opened the door to find my parents standing there with Chloe just behind them. My father carried a bottle of wine, his hands stiff. My mother smiled the way people do when they're unsure of the rules. You have a beautiful home, she said softly, as if testing the sound of the words. Chloe's eyes moved around the space, lingering on the view, on the same balcony that had appeared in that 10-second clip. It's higher than I imagined, she murmured. Come in, I said simply. Dinner's ready. Saturday. The first few minutes passed with the small talk of strangers trying to act like family, weather, traffic, the restaurant they'd tried last week. I poured wine, placed soup bowls in front of them, and took my own seat. The air was so quiet I could hear the faint crackle of the fireplace from the living room. My father cleared his throat. Your mother's been meaning to reach out sooner, he began. My mother's hand brushed his wrist gently. We just wanted to see you. To understand. I set down my spoon, looked up, and decided not to waste the moment. Then let me help you understand, I said. Their faces stilled. I invited you here not to argue, I continued, my voice calm, but because there are things I've never said. And maybe it's time. I looked between them, the two people who had taught me how to hold a fork, how to write my name, and yet somehow, never how to feel seen. There were Christmases when you forgot I existed. Birthdays that were too busy. New Year's where I sat in the dark watching fireworks on a tiny TV while you took Chloe downtown. You told me once, you'll understand when you're older, your sister deserves it more. You said it like it was fact, not cruelty. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. I pressed on, softly but firmly. When I got into Stanford, you told me it was too far. When I started my company, you said technology wasn't real work. You called me home because it was more convenient for the family. I learned to shrink so it wouldn't hurt as much. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet enough, I could still belong. For a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. My father looked down at his hands, rubbing the rim of his glass. Then he said quietly, Bodar kong nin the. I didn't see. The words fell heavy, but honest. He looked up, eyes glistening. You were always so independent. I thought you didn't need us. My mother's voice cracked as she whispered, Mẹ tưởng con mạnh nên không cần, hóa ra mẹ sai. I thought you were strong, that you didn't need anyone. I was wrong. She reached forward as if to touch my hand, then stopped midway, unsure. For a long moment, no one spoke. Chloe stared at her soup, her reflection trembling in the surface. Finally, she lifted her head. I didn't know everyone felt that way, she said quietly. I just thought I was doing what I was told. I didn't realize how small it made you feel. She didn't say sorry, not directly, but the silence that followed her words felt like a kind of fracture, a small crack in something that had once been solid denial. I didn't rush to fill it. I just nodded, steady. I'm not asking for apologies, I said. Only for presence. To show up, honestly, when it matters. I reached beneath the table and placed 3 black envelopes on the linen runner, one in front of each of them. For you, I said to my parents, these are for the new year. My mother hesitated before opening hers. Inside was a small gold card with handwritten words. If you truly want to show up, the door here is open. My father unfolded his and stared for a long while, nodding slowly. Then I turned to Chloe. Her envelope was thinner. For you, I said. If next year you want to be part of something different, I'd like us to build a corner for the kids together. A place where no one's separated. Not even us. Her fingers tightened around the card. She looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw her expression soften, not guilt, not pride, just humanity. I think I'd like that, she said. We didn't linger long after that. Dinner ended with quiet clinking, not the silence of tension but the kind that comes when everyone is finally full, not just with food, but with words that needed to be said. When they left, my mother hugged me briefly, her arms fragile but real. My father shook my hand, and his grip was firmer than I remembered. Chloe paused at the door. You really built all this yourself? She asked. I smiled faintly. With a little help. But yes. She nodded, lips parting as if to say more, then changed her mind. "See you soon," she said instead, and stepped into the elevator. When the door closed, the penthouse fell still again. I poured the last of the wine into my glass and walked to the balcony. The city had returned to its normal rhythm, no confetti, no fireworks, just lights winking across Times Square like a quiet heartbeat. I leaned on the railing, the metal cold beneath my palms, and breathed in the night air. "I used to count down in the dark," I whispered to myself. "This year, I count up toward presence, toward the kind of family that chooses to show up, even when it's hard." Oh. Inside, the chandelier reflected faintly on the glass, framing the set of keys still hanging beside the balcony door. I smiled. "You don't need anyone to give you a seat," I murmured. "Build your own balcony and open it only for those who deserve to stand on it." Then I turned off the lights, leaving only the golden glow spilling out across the skyline. If you've ever been left out of a New Year's celebration, tell me where you're listening from, your city and your current time. And tell me this. A. Would you walk away quietly? Or B. Build your own balcony and invite only those who truly show up?